Dear Dr. Kasturi Rangan, Shri Ramadorai, Dr. Ramamurthy, honored invitees and participants of the seminar, my dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by wishing you a very good morning and welcoming you to this two-day seminar on When Science Meets the Public, Bridging the Gap, which is being organized to celebrate the 26th anniversary of our institute, popularly known as NIAS. The principal mandate of NIAS, for which it was set up by Mr. J.R.D. Tata and Dr. Raja Ramanna in 1988, is multidisciplinary research. A unique research institution in India, NIAS has faculty conducting research in four principal areas: natural and engineering sciences, social sciences, humanities, and international strategic studies. But each research problem is addressed from a multitude of perspectives, often collaboratively, by faculty belonging to different disciplines or even schools of thought. What also makes NIAS unusual in its research endeavor is that the institute is committed to non-mainstream research. Much of the academic research conducted here is thus not in conventional laboratories, but in the field and in theoretical areas. The various disciplines in which field research is being conducted in NIAS, to mention a few, includes agroecology and biosecurity, animal studies and human-wildlife conflict, anthropology, archaeology, art and heritage studies, behavioral ecology and conservation biology, climate and environmental science, cognitive science and consciousness studies, economics, education, sociology, and urban studies, while the theoretical research in the institute has largely focused on complex systems, computational and mathematical modeling, international strategic studies, philosophy, and policy research. These research programs have typically resulted in a fairly impressive body of publications, which includes books, peer-reviewed papers, technical reports, conference proceedings, research reviews and backgrounders, policy papers, and popular articles in the media and elsewhere. It must also be mentioned here that much of this research has been and continues to be conducted by a number of doctoral students and postdoctoral fellows who work in close collaboration with the faculty. These students and fellows are supported by individual fellowships and research grants, which are raised from a host of funding institutions, both governmental and non-governmental, in India and from abroad. NIAS also believes in the dissemination of the results that emerge from its extensive multidisciplinary research programs, and therefore it conducts a wide array of teaching schools and training programs directed at decision makers at various levels of functioning in the academic community, often college and university teachers, governmental bodies active in the public sector, such as state governments or national level organizations, including the DST, the Defense Research and Development Organization, ISRO, and the Ministry of Environment and Forests. This also includes leading private sector organizations. Our programs include them as well. Most of the research and dissemination programs thus aim to address a wide variety of scientific and social problems facing our country and its citizens today. Again, from a diversity of multidisciplinary perspectives and involving people from different disciplines and vocations, both in their roles as actors and the audience. As you will therefore realize from this brief introduction to our institution, it is extremely important for us to be able to communicate with one another, both across disciplines within the institute, but more importantly, with the world at large. This is why we felt that we should perhaps examine more formally and take on a pioneering role in investigating the current status of science communication in our country today. Even more crucially, it is perhaps time that we begin active discussions to establish a roadmap for this enterprise in the India of tomorrow, identify the stakeholders, raise vital issues that must be dialogued, and discover formal as well as innovative ways in which such communication can be successfully carried out. All of this is critical, not only to communicate about our own nation's achievements to our own people, but also on occasion to warn us about the natural and man-made calamities that we must guard against, and finally, to bring together this great country with its remarkable diverse people and their cultures. I'm sure there is plenty that we will raise to the fore, think about deeply, and discuss at length over the next 2 days. Let me now end with a few brief but absolutely essential words of gratitude and acknowledgement. Dr. V.S. Ramamurthy, our director, and Shri Pallav Bagla, who has been holding the T.V. Raman Pai Chair of the Institute, have conceived of a hopefully long-term commitment that NIAS must make towards the communication of the natural and social sciences to the general public across our country, and have been instrumental in visualizing this important anniversary seminar. The entire planning and coordination of the seminar has been executed by Sri Pallav Bagla himself, as well as two young assistant professors of our institute, Dr. V.V. Binoy and Dr. Hippu Sok Krishnanathan. They worked untiringly to make it come to fruition. Finally, last but not the least, this entire seminar has been made possible by the unstinting efforts of a very remarkable individual, the diminutive but amazingly efficient Miss V.B. Mariammal, whom one never saw, but whose presence one felt powerfully all along the journey. Thank you very much also, each and every one of you who are here, for the ultimate success of this seminar depends on your participation and your deliberations. Thank you, one and all. Let me now briefly introduce Dr. V.S. Ramamurthy, Director of Nia, and invite him to give a few words. He is a well-known Indian nuclear scientist with a broad range of contributions from basic research to science administration. Professor Ramamurthy started his career in the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, Mumbai, in the year 1963, and subsequently went on to make important research contributions, both experimental and theoretical, in many areas of nuclear fission and heavy ion reaction mechanisms, statistical and thermodynamic properties of nuclei, physics of atomic and molecular clusters, and low-energy accelerator applications. During the period from 1995 to 2006, Professor Ramamurthy was fully involved in science promotion in India as Secretary to the Government of India, Department of Science and Technology in New Delhi. He was also the chairman of the IAEA Standing Advisory Group on Nuclear Applications for nearly a decade, chairman, Board of Governors, Indian Institute of Technology, Delhi, chairman, Recruitment and Assessment Board of the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, and member, National Security Advisory Board. After retirement from government service, Professor Ramamurthy, in addition to continuing research in nuclear physics in the Inter-University Accelerator Center of New Delhi, has also been actively involved in human resource development in all aspects of nuclear research and applications. He is currently the director of NIAS, chairman of the Board of Governors of the NIT Hamirpur, and the chairman of the Board of Governors of the IIT Ropar. In recognition of his services to the growth of science and technology in the country, Professor Ramamurthy was awarded one of the top civilian awards of the country, the Padma Bhushan, by the Government of India in 2005. Dr. Ramamurthy.
Dr. Ramdarai, Dr. Kasurarangan, distinguished participants, good morning to all of you. Let me join Professor Anindya in welcoming all of you to this seminar. As was mentioned earlier, today marks the beginning of the 27th year of NIAS's existence. Now, as you are aware, the theme of the seminar is when science meets the public, bridging the gap. This presumes that there is a gap. And we are going to discuss, is there a gap? If there is a gap, what do we need to do? And what is the cost we pay if we don't address this gap? India is one of the few countries in the world that chose the path of science and technology for development almost immediately after becoming independent, coming out of the colonial rule. And the early decades were indeed tough, when on one hand, the national science and technology infrastructure, whether it is education, whether it is R&D, whether it is even technology-based industries, the infrastructure was poor. Scientific literacy among the bulk of the population living in our villages, 75%, more than 75%, was indeed non-existent. It is not that the people in the villages were ignorant, but the thing is they were not aware of what's going on in the rest of the world when the whole scenario is changing very fast. Across the world, high technology products and services at that time were a luxury of the rich. If you have money, you think about it. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about it. There is very little to do with the lives of the common man. And therefore, it's not surprising that science and communication in those days was indeed synonymous with the inculcation of scientific spirit, the modern scientific spirit of examining and understanding. And more importantly, very often removal of superstitions. Many of the institutions involved in science communication of those decades were actually talking about removing superstitions among the population. things changed rather dramatically over the next few decades. By that time, say the 80s or even late 70s, technology products were making deep inroads into the life of the common man, rich or poor. It's no longer limited to the rich. With poor scientific literacy, the common man had difficulties in understanding the relevance of technology to his day-to-day life. He has the product on the market, but he doesn't know whether he actually is good for him or not good for him. And you may recall the early resistance to the introduction of computers in government offices. A state government went and said this is an anti-labor policy and we don't want it. This was 80s, not very far away back. The need of the hour at that time was clearly science communication that will let people know how science and technology is progressing across the world and what it can do to improve the day-to-day lives here. So from the 50s and 60s, there was a clear shift when we were in the 80s. 21st century is very different. Today, there is no aspect of human life that is untouched by science and technology in some form or another, cutting across economic and social boundaries. Whether it is rich or poor, it makes no difference. True to the dictum, the consumer is the king, the consumers also always have a say, often the final say in the choice of technology. Doesn't depend on the technology per se. It's a good technologically good solution is not necessarily the good solution for the public at large. More importantly, in a democratic environment, the citizens also have the final say in regulatory matters. Whether you want to bring some regulation, it is not the scientists who decide. It is no longer the case. One Baba, one Nehru decided what the country needs. Today, everyone likes to have a say on this. The recent debates on nuclear energy, GM food, etc. clearly demonstrate that taking public into confidence is an important component of technology options. If you don't take public into confidence, you are going to be in trouble. It is only science communication that can ensure informed technology options by the country, by the public, by the government. But science communication today is no longer unidirectional. It is bidirectional. It is not that the guru or the expert tells what is good for them, what is not good for them, and they also have very strong views, which the scientific community, technology community has to understand. It is necessary to communicate science and technology to the common man, but it is equally important to communicate the public perception to the scientists and other policymakers. This is the new challenge of the 21st century. That's where we are today. And that major difference is, science communication is no longer a unidirectional effort, it is a bidirectional effort. Are we geared to face the challenge? In my view, not really. I don't know how many of you will agree with me. We do not have, number one, enough science communicators. The scientists are not the best science communicators, and the professional communicators are not too many. The channels of communications are weak. We have a half an hour morning and Rajya Sabha TV, one program on science. That is not going to change the science picture at all in the country. We need to do much more than that. The India-specific challenge of language multiplicity persists. Everything what you do has to be done in 22 languages. And that is not easy. It's not easy. And last but not the least, we are not doing enough. Everybody thinks we also do science communication because it is either social responsibility or something, some section exists on science communication, they have to be active. I don't think we are doing enough on science communication. And this is one of the reasons why we are here. I invite all of you not only participate in the deliberations where you share your experience, but also suggest a roadmap for strengthening science communication in the country, what needs to be done and how it should be done. I would stop at this stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ramamurthy. May I now invite Mr. S. Ramadurai to say a few words. Mr. Ramadurai is currently the chairperson of the Council of Management of NIAS. He, of course, needs no introduction. He's been an eminent IT industry leader, technocrat, and a recognized global leader. But more importantly, as a part of the larger NIAS family, he has been very actively contributing to our own thinking about our research programs and ideas. He's a man associated with India's most famous information technology company, the Tata Consultancy Services Limited, where he spent more than 4 decades. In 2009, when he stepped down as its CEO, TCS had grown to be a $6 billion global company employing 3 lakh skilled workers in 46 countries. Recognizing his special quality at nurturing talent since 2011, he has been piloting the National Skill Development Agency as its chairman with the rank of cabinet minister. An alumnus of the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, he is recognized as one of the pioneers who transformed the Indian IT industry. Author of an acclaimed book, The TCS Story and Beyond, which was published in 2011, Mr. Ramadurai is also passionate about photography and Indian classical music. Mr. Ramadurai.
Very good morning to all of you. Dr. Kasturangan, Dr. Ramamurthy, it's great to be here for this seminar on science communication, when science meets the public, bridging the gap over the next 2 days. As already mentioned, today marks the 27th Foundation Day of NIAS. The foundational mandate of NIAS, as envisaged by its visionary founder, Mr. J.R.D. Tata, is to carry out inter- and multidisciplinary research on problems of relevance to the country and, more importantly, to disseminate them among the public. As the present chairman of the NIAS Management Council, I'm happy to say that NIAS has been reasonably successful in fulfilling this mandate and carving out a unique place for itself in inter- and multidisciplinary research in the country. I'm also happy to note that NIAS has chosen to discuss science communication in this 2-day seminar being organized as part of its Foundation Day celebrations. We are living in an era not only dominated but also often driven by technologies, that too fast-changing technologies. Today there is no aspect of human life that is untouched by technologies in some form or another. The way we communicate, do business plan our work days, and our holidays are dominated by information communication technologies. In fact, it's all of that make up the marketplace, often dictate the choice of technologies. And while we use these technologies, they are concealed behind simple, easy-to-use gadgets. Most of us could not be bothered behind the science of it all. Normally, this would be fine, but consider the fact that most social media users are unaware of the fact that every time they are on the internet, they leave behind bits and bytes of data about themselves. The simple click of the like tab on the Facebook makes them vulnerable. Millions of youth in India, even in remote villages, today are on Facebook. So should there be more awareness generation on what constitutes sensible internet behavior? Should there be a more public engagement around cybersecurity? And should this be a part of our general education curriculum? The answer to all of this is a resounding yes. Clearly, there is a deep connect between science, policy, and society. In a knowledge society, we all need to work to promote scientific literacy so that everyone is up to speed, empowered, and ready to contribute to the great debates about science, technology, and the future. This is possible through public engagement, which is nothing but different ways in which the activity and benefits of science, technology, and research can be shared with the public with a view to interact, exchange with the goal of generating mutual benefit. Today, I see a big chasm between scientists and institutes of higher learning and, of course, the society at large in India. They both talk a different language, and therefore the communication of science in a manner that is appealing and simple to people is key to bridging the gap. On one hand, scientists need resources and forums to have meaningful conversations with the public. And on the other, we need forums that bring together citizens and scientists. Consider the simple fact In Mumbai, the monsoon started a few days ago. The seafront is a popular place for people to gather to see the waves in their glory. This year, though, we have had particularly high tides and furious high 5-meter waves lashing the coast, catching several young people unawares and leading to their being drowned. People are assigning such unusual phenomena to the climate change effect. Now, climate change is one topic that's absolutely amenable to public engagement. People are affected, they would benefit with scientifically presented knowledge. On the other hand, the government can leverage such forums to drive behavioral changes in people, leading to conservation of resources, consuming less water, electricity, etc. We have to find ways to create forums to reach the average citizen on the streets, where talking about scientific issues could become as natural as talking about cricket or football. Science festivals is one way of public engagement. As an example, the British Science Festival is one of Europe's largest celebrations of science, engineering, and technology. With over 250 events, activities, exhibitions, and trips taking place over a week in September, while I have not participated myself, I hear that this program of events offers something for everyone, with activities for families and school groups, adults looking for entertainment and stimulating debate, as well as events aimed at professionals interested in the latest research. For instance, the exchange event brings people face to face with leading scientists with a gift for storytelling and the knack of explaining complex research clearly. Museums are another opportunity for public engagement. Innovative outreach programs that create compelling experiences to engage with family activities through workshops, family science day, etc., must be started in our country. Museums must compete with cinema theaters for weekend family outings. Research shows that parents believe that museums are good places to take children to learn. And several studies support the idea that families use museums as socially mediated learning environments. In one study, children indicated that they often prefer to visit museums with their families rather than school groups because they get to look at more things of interest to them personally and talk to their families about what they are doing and seeing. Similarly, there are over 2,500 botanic gardens around the world with facilities that schools can use. In Michigan Technological University, National Science Foundation is sponsoring a program where PhD students are being placed into middle school classrooms to teach students about watershed science. In the classroom, the grad students hone their communication skills and help cultivate the next generation of scientists. However, the most important objective of this program is to increase each PhD student's ability to communicate the content of their research and how they go about doing it in a way that middle school students can understand. We are all familiar with the TED Talks. TED Technology, Entertainment, Design is a global set of conferences under the catchy slogan, Ideas Worth Spreading. TED used to be an exclusive conference in Monterey, California, when it first began in 1984. It's only in 2006, when TED Talks were launched using YouTube as a platform, that its popularity really soared. TED Talks have been a great medium for scientists to bridge the gap with the public. There are 411 talks on science alone. Clearly, there are socio-cultural impacts of the new technologies. There are known and unknown future risks. In the early years of the technology era, a few decades ago, it was adequate for the governments to take the views of a few specialists and make technology opinions and the enabling policies. Today's world is indeed very, very different. On one hand, countries across the world are moving towards democratic forms of government, where all policy options, including technology options, have to be taken with direct public involvement and approval. On the other hand, the technologies are getting more complex, and informed decision-making by the public at large is becoming more and more difficult. It's important for all the stakeholders, including the governments, to understand absolutely the public perceptions. It clearly calls for a two-way communication, which Professor Ramamurthy also mentioned, between the stakeholders and the public at large. Many countries are seized with the need for wider public participation in scientific discussion and have put in place national strategy for the same. Institutions such as Nia and others must take the lead in preparing a white paper to be presented to the Ministry of Science and Technology to initiate such a policy for India as well. In 2010, the Australian government released the Inspiring Australia National Strategy for Engagement with the Sciences. The purpose is to establish a national approach for communication of science and its benefits to a broad range of stakeholders, including policymakers and the public, to create scientifically engaged Australia. In 2009, UK released a report prepared for the Science for All expert group on the challenges of the 21st century science, a review of the evidence base surrounding the value of public engagement by scientists. It aimed to assess whether the increasing amount of activity makes a difference to improving the environment for science, and what certainty we might have whether further increasing engagement would further improve the UK's scientific environment. This paper reviews the evidence underlying the idea of public engagement to better model the relationship between scientists and publics, shaping science's special societal function. The British government's Department for Business, Innovation and Skills have also commissioned a series of studies looking at public attitude to science in the United Kingdom. In the United States, Center for Advancement of Informal Science Education, or CASE, released a report entitled Many Experts, Many Audiences, Public Engagement with Science and Informal Science Education, a CASE inquiry report in 2009. The report seeks to serve as a prompt for discussion and exploration of public engagement in science. Following up on work done in connection with this CASE report, the Museum of Science in Boston, with funding from the National Science Foundation, collected information of over 200 projects that involved public engagement and convened a workshop of practitioners of public engagement to identify strategic directions for future work within this field. In a country as diverse as ours, a large rural-urban divide, multiple languages, and a political system that diffuses the borders between public good and private good all make policy making a challenge. We have seen this in the recent years in the case of siting of nuclear power stations, GM food, land for large infrastructure projects, water sharing between states, etc. While public involvement is intense in all of the above, it cannot be said that public understanding of the underlying issues are as healthy as they should be. This calls for more public dissemination of knowledge through the right forums, and I believe our institutions of higher learning must play a leading role in this. I am glad to note that a public lecture by Sri Jairam Ramesh, former Minister for Environment and Forest, Government of India, is being arranged this evening. As you are aware, Sri Jairam Ramesh has actually seen how public perceptions, right or wrong, can influence and often bring to a grinding halt policy making by the government. I noticed very interesting sessions are planned in the agenda, communicating with local communities and in local languages, the nuclear story, the inculcation of a scientific temper, etc. So I do hope that the brainstorming session being organized tomorrow afternoon will help us to chart out a roadmap of science communication in the country. I wish Nia all success in its efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sri Ramadurai. I would now like to say a few words about another individual who requires no introduction, Dr. K. Kasturirangan, who will deliver the inaugural lecture. Dr. Kasturirangan is an Indian space scientist who headed the Indian Space Research Organization from 1994 to 2003. He has been a member of the upper house, the Rajya Sabha, between 2003 and 2009, and a former member of the Planning Commission of the Government of India. He was also Chancellor of the Jawaharlal Nehru University, Chairman of the Karnataka Knowledge Commission, and was earlier Director of Nia. He is a recipient of 3 of the top civilian awards from the Government of India, the Padma Bhushan in 1982, the Padma Shri in 1982, the Padma Bhushan in 1992, and the Padma Vibhushan in 2000. Dr. Kasturirangan has been responsible for directing the Indian Space Program for over 9 years as Chairman of ISRO and the Space Commission, and as the Secretary of the Government of India in the Department of Space before laying down office in August 2003. Under his leadership, the program witnessed several major milestones, including the successful launching and operationalization of India's prestigious launch vehicles, the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle, the PSLV, and the Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle, GSLV. Dr. Kasturirangan has also led the initiative for India to enter the planetary exploration era by an extensive series of studies leading to the definition of Chandrayaan-1. Dr. Kasturirangan's principal research interests are in the areas of energy X-ray and gamma-ray astronomy, as well as optical astronomy. Defining India's most ambitious space-based high-energy astronomy observatory and initiating related activities have been amongst his major academic contributions. He has also made significant contributions to the studies of cosmic X-ray and gamma-ray sources and the effects of cosmic X-rays in the lower atmosphere. Dr. Kasturirangan.
Sri Ramadurai, Chairman of the Management Council of the Nia, Professor B.S. Ramamurthy, Director, Professor Anindya Sinha, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to express my grateful thanks to the Director, Professor Ramamurthy, for inviting me to deliver this keynote address in the seminar, Science Meets the Public, Bridging the Gap, a theme which is timely in the context of India's major ambitions to use the instrument of science and technology for socio-economic development in the coming years, but on a scale which has been unprecedented. I'm happy to see Sri Ramadurai here, who has recently assumed the chairmanship of the Governing Council of Nia. I'm sure in the coming years, the Institute is certainly destined to reach higher levels of performance and achievements under your visionary guidance. I'm also delighted to see my erstwhile colleague, Sri Anindya Sinha, the Dean of the Academic Programs, as well as Pallav Bagla, an outstanding science communicator with whom I had a long and enriching association. Also good to see many of my past colleagues here, with whom I look forward to re-establish links now that I'm in Bangalore. In the first Atom for Peace Award presented to Niels Bohr, in an outstanding physicist of the 20th century, a principal figure in elucidating the revisions of the philosophical foundations of physics for comprehension of quantum phenomena, James Killian had the following to say about Bohr, and I quote, "In your profession, in your teaching, in your public life, you have shown the domain of science and the domain of humanities are in reality of single realm. In all your career, you have exemplified the wisdom, the humaneness, the intellectual splendor which the Atom for Peace Award would recognize." I unquote. In the context of increasing role of science and technology to improve the quality of life of the humankind, the above statement about Bohr is not only pertinent to the present scientific community, but probably even more relevant. Innovative use of advanced technologies is central to the process of accelerating development. A wide range of priorities drive need for advanced technologies, from energy to water management, to farm production, to medical research, to waste disposal, to healthcare, to communications and transportation. Advances taking place in the frontier areas of research, such as micro-miniaturized electronics, advanced sensors, alternate energy sources, synthetic biology, materials and nanotechnologies are being integrated rapidly into the application systems. As a driver for future strategic fundamental research is also undertaken through the fields of nuclear, aeronautics, space and life sciences. While such new technologies are expected to bring revolutionary changes to our lives and environment, there is a flip side too. There are often unintended consequences. While the usefulness of nuclear power, genetically modified crops and biotechnology or digital technologies are evident, there are also perceived and real negative consequences which trigger conflicts between the government policy and some segment of the society. The reasons are not difficult to imagine. Along with marvelous benefits of high technology, the world has seen deadly weapons of mass destruction, unabated pollution of environment, and increasing health risks to large sections of populations. Public, not only in our country, but elsewhere, has also come to take often a skeptical view of government's communications and its positions. scientific community too suffer partly, as shown by a recent survey abroad on genetic technologies, which revealed the lack of trust of public in scientists in placing society's interest above their own goals. We have also witnessed much public outcry in the ill effects from the use of pesticides and the ethical issues connected with stem cell research and applications. All over the globe, public engagement is increasingly being considered as central to the development of science policies. Let us examine a few cases in this connection, and particularly to show the fact that there are no tailor-made solutions to have a public education strategy. It needs to be tailored with respect to the specific theme under or the specific subject under the consideration. And one of the things that I could start with is related to the biotechnology advances, and particularly because of the public interest in the introduction of GMOs into the food chain. Biotechnology advances has been making revolutionary impact in the fields relating to food, nutrition, healthcare, and environmental sustainability. Their applications enable crops-resistant pest diseases, abiotic stress, and crops of high-yielding variety, all of which assume importance in the context of addressing the food security. Much debate and controversy has arisen recently, however, when genetically modified pest-resistant version of Brinjal, known as Bt Brinjal, was proposed for approvals for commercial cultivation. The opposition came from a section of scientific community itself, besides some environmental group pointing risks due to this GM crop in terms of presence of unwanted transgene which encodes resistance to certain antibiotics. Transfer of such resistance to humans could be a cause for concern. Several lacunae were also pointed out with the evaluation process that did not focus on realistic environmental concerns, inadequately evaluated some, and ignored other real concerns. The proponents for this GM crop, on the other hand, argued that this transgenic crop will reduce the use of insecticide for the most prevalent pest, namely the BFSP, the brinjal shoot and fruit borer, by 70%, and that for other insects by 42%. Since brinjal is cultivated over a large area in India, with a production of something like 8.2 billion tons, and the pest BSFB causes losses of 60 to 70% in commercial plantings, this development should be welcomed. The controversy, however, culminated in an indefinite moratorium which has been more recently reviewed. The case of Bt Brinjal is typical of the strategy normally adopted by the scientific establishments with respect to the public engagement, which is limited to a top-down process of communicating and obtaining endorsement of science which is already planned for implementation by them, especially when an interested party like developing organization performs evaluation. There arise questions of credibility, genuine or otherwise. An important lesson from Bt Brinjal case is the need for an independent agency to evaluate and engage with public groups to assure full transparency of relevant information and a comprehensive evaluation and compliance. In general, it's also important that there should be a systematic and constant monitoring of GM crops in scientific terms, and the policy making should be guided by such feedback for corrective measures. Proper evaluation of nature of public concerns and objective responses and ability to create necessary confidence level in public mind need expertise beyond pure scientific domain. The need for resultant flexibility in policy measures is central to many areas such as environment, health and safety, where complex interplay of several disciplines is inevitable and the very evolutionary process of knowledge has to be factored in. In fact, I may mention that Mr. Jairam and myself, we went to address the presidents of all the 6 academies in this country in trying to see whether they can come out with a comprehensive report on the Bt Brinjal question and whether that becomes a basis to defend the case in public with respect to the GMOs. They did a very good job of creating a document, and this document, of course, is available in the INSA website. And it is for the first time the presidents of all the 6 academies came together to look at this issue. But unfortunately, that failed to convince the public. I don't think that the level of opposition by some of the segments of the society could be. In fact, Jairam did find it very difficult to even carry this forward, in spite of the fact this is an academic report that essentially shows academic report can be authentic scientifically, but when it comes to communication, certainly there is one more level of an communication system that we need to establish, which probably was lacking. Another interesting area relates to the development of nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is springing from the multidisciplinary convergence of advances in condensed matter physics, engineering, microbiology, and chemistry, deals with materials and systems with at least one dimension about 1 to 100 nanometers and involve processes that modify molecular structure features in terms of physical as well as chemical attributes. This new era has triggered by the development of instruments capable of imaging, manipulating single molecules or atoms. National Science Foundation of US has earlier estimated a global market for the nanotechnology products and services reaching $1 trillion value by the middle of this decade. While the technology is still evolving, its applications are already found in several products such as sunscreens, antibacterial surfaces, automobile tires, and some anti-cancer drugs. And there is promise for more number of benefits. Nanotechnology's potential use can extend to every field related to science and technology. Use of nanotechnology is also fraught with risks. Looking at the health hazard, it has been demonstrated that the inhalation of buckyballs and nanotubes can affect the lungs. The deleterious effects become apparent after years. Scientific evidence also indicates serious toxic nature of nanoparticles of gold and silver, even though in the bulk level they do not exhibit the same. Hence, scientific certainty about toxicity of materials in nanoform requires detailed investigations in order to evaluate and map the nature, level, and remedies of risks. Apart from technology issues, there are ethical issues of privacy protection that come up when the revolution of the nanotechnology allows vast amounts of information to be stored and transmitted through tiny devices. A proactive process, in fact, I am coming to another model that was adopted, the BT Brinjal, the type of things that have been adopted in this country and elsewhere is one type. Here is another model that I would like to elaborate a little, a proactive process adopted by the Dutch government, I should say, for assessing public attitudes and level of risk acceptability for evolving policy on nanotechnology is a model worth of study in the pursuit of relating the issues of nanotechnologies with society. The government of Netherlands set up an independent committee to organize the dialogue, thus strongly giving a message that it is not intending to merely push its own agenda on the policy for these technologies, but significantly enhance the credibility of the process. The committee devised a three-step process, which included providing information to public, increasing awareness, and two-way interactions with the public. The initial steps of communicating to public and enhancing their awareness was considered necessary in view of the novelty of the technology and dynamically progressing knowledge. This made the dialogue more effective. The overall dialogue activity was divided into some 40 projects, and a number of scientists, NGOs, companies, and individuals were outsourced through open competitive process to carry out the same. The public agenda, made representative with wide range of people and process, was accessible through a variety of media, including science caves, science cafes, theater plays, and teaching materials apart from television and internet. The end result of this multi-pronged process has been positive in raising awareness in public of the risks of nanotechnologies. The most striking result of the Dutch societal dialogue on nanotechnology is that after the dialogue, the general public in the Netherlands displayed more awareness of the risks of nanotechnologies and at the same time expressed more support for further development of the nanotechnology. This example provides a lesson in the governance of the risk felt by populations in introducing new science. Empowered public participation should be enabled by a process which is credible and insulated from overplay of interest of any one community among diverse actors such as government, scientific institutions, business organizations, and media. This process expands horizons even beyond regulations to influence society to accept risks associated with modern scientific endeavors and to mandate their progress. In the democratic traditions of India, relevance of such mechanisms needs no emphasis. Chandrayaan-1 is a fine example of a public engagement implemented by the space program. What distinguishes India, this is another kind of a model that we adopted. What distinguishes India's space program from many others is the process that it has been adopting in bringing stakeholders early in its planning. Soon after the learning phase in 1970s, the program developed interface with users and made it driven by the users. Regular two-way communication process was set up to derive inputs from definition of programs as well as for implementation and validation of application. Being user-driven also meant being accountable and creating necessary transparency. Such transparency and accountability were consistently practiced, and these translated into an organizational culture that fostered participative role for all the stakeholders. This generated strong trust plus, in contrast to the trust deficit, which often results from the one-way flow of information, as Dr. Ramamurthy mentioned. Trust surplus generated through user-driven programs had opened the door of public support for the Indian Space Research Organization. Chandrayaan-1 is an example of an offshoot of the aforementioned organizational culture. India's Chandrayaan mission represented a new dimension to the country's space endeavor, calling for not so insignificant financial and other resources, and initially lacking visibility of direct benefit to majority of general public. Embarking on such a program called for eliciting public opinion with reference to aspects of enrichment of the knowledge, enhancement of national prestige, technological leapfrogging, igniting the mind of young generation, and equally important, placing India in an exclusive club and thereby creating the necessary credentials for international participation in collaborative framework. The concept for Chandrayaan mission as an avant-garde interplanetary mission was proposed during a forum organized to celebrate the National Technology Day on May 1999 in participation with several parliamentarians, policy makers, scientists and technologies, and media. I should particularly point out the presence of Pallav Bagla here, who was present at this particular meeting and who also was the first to report about this possibility in the next day's papers, and which actually, he went into the details of the type of justification that was provided in this briefing. And in fact, that really put India in a very different perspective so far as the India space program is concerned. So I remember this with respect to Pallav Bagla's own contribution through the media, where he put out the case for the India's moon mission. Subsequently, the scientific goals and challenges of the mission were presented at the Indian Academy of Sciences and also followed by presentation to the Astronautical Society of India. Both these are preeminent professional bodies, strongly endorse the proposed plans, considering the scientific and technological outputs of such an endeavor and the future opportunities it can open up. A standing committee, you can look at the dimensions into which this decision-making process went through. The third element is a standing committee of parliament strongly endorsed the preliminary plans in this regard, sounding the positive political will cutting across the diversity of, in fact, 40 MPs were present to give this presentation, and they came out in their report with 4 pages exclusively devoted to the recommendations not only of Chandrayaan, but even they made an interesting remark that India sounds to be less ambitious, that they are not venturing into other planets. So one can see the political will also coming into picture in the decision-making process here. The proposal itself was further developed in full detail and scientific and technical terms by a competent task force and was peer-reviewed by a national committee of experts. Space Commission, the apex body of its approval of the project, recognizing its role in advancing the scientific frontiers, expanding the technological horizons, opening up of international cooperative opportunities, and fostering synergy between multitude of institutions that could galvanize a new generation of scientific talents. It's only in this backdrop that on the Independence Day in 2003, Prime Minister announced the nation's decision to enter the era of the planetary exploration by undertaking Chandrayaan-1. It's not out of place to mention that the entire process of preparatory work took 4 years, but due to the diligent preparation, subsequent actual development and launch of the spacecraft itself took just 4 years, something that was very well predicted at the time when this program was undertaken. When the structured interaction process was undertaken, it is to be noted that there were a few individuals who even expressed reservations for undertaking such a mission of what value is it for India and its development. It was assuring to see that the concerned members of the public were actively willing to look at both the pros and cons. That's more important. Indeed, total absence of any negative view would have given us a little bit of discomfort, I should say. This is just one example of the way we went through with respect to a major program which this country undertook, but where we sought the support from several segments of the society in several ways before we decided upon embarking on the same. Before I leave the question of ISRO, I would like to say a couple of things about ISRO, what we have tried to do, which could be of interest to the people here while discussion. One is a program, an exercise we undertook in doing a cost-benefit analysis of the entire program. This is not something that is done in the scientific and technological institution. What we try to do is not to, in fact, Dr. Kelkar, one of the very eminent economists, he suggested that we subject the entire space program to a cost-benefit analysis. And it is not an economic viability analysis, but it's a cost-benefit analysis because the societal component is very strong in this. And he suggested this, and we gave it to Professor U. Shankar of the Madras Institute of Economics and placed at his disposal all the details with regard to the space program, with respect to the missions, the type of outcome of the missions, what we could evaluate, the type of resources that have been deployed, and the type of returns, whether it is tangible or intangible benefits. These were all examined. He went into the great details of this, and out came a very important report with respect to carrying out a cost-benefit analysis of this. And I should say that it will also later on become a University of Oxford Press publication, which is available. It was one of the very interesting aspects of making sure that some of the public apprehensions with respect to the cost effectiveness, the use of alternate systems for use in the science and technology, these are some of the things that was addressed in this kind of an analysis, and which could be of importance when questions are raised about the relevance of a particular program or a particular strategy to realize solutions to certain type of problems. The Space Department has also set up a very formal public relations and public outreach. Of course, here one has to admit that this is more to interact with the public with respect to the program itself. No critical judgment is made out by this particular thing. So we need to strengthen that kind of an activity where we are having an outreach program where we try to bring in justifications through analysis of pros and cons, like the one that we did, the cost-benefit analysis. And this is another kind of a thing. We also organized in different parts of the country seminars for the benefit of reporters. This is one thing which we undertook primarily because the subtleties of the space program, the technologies and other kinds of things, we need to really bring it up. And this is one thing we thought will be best done if we try to address the correspondents and other kind of reporters with regard to the science and technology of space. And we organize seminars regionally and try to sensitize the various people in various science communications interested in reporting space as to what this is all about. And we really gave them quite an amount of material which they could follow up. Domain use of science and technology in daily life has widened in several dimensions, thereby touching virtually every facet of life. Extraordinary communication channels have created great awareness among lay public. Increased number of educated in the population facilitates meaningful debates on the pros and cons of adopting science and technology initiatives for improving the quality of life. These kinds of debates are going to be the order of the day rather than an exception. Sustainable support to scientific endeavors depends on the risks perceived and accepted by the public to human health, safety, and environment. No modern technology application is free from risks, nor can it provide any certainty on the level of risks over a long term. Understanding and acceptance of such risks as weighted against perceived benefits by all those who are affected can lead to effective absorption of new technologies such as GM foods or new genre of drugs. The level of risks is to be communicated in a manner that it meets with credibility criteria and create proper appreciation on issues of concern to the public. This is a social process for which many scientific establishments or even government agencies, as Ramamurthy rightly pointed out, lack the infrastructure or the relevant resources. Beyond the domains of science, it needs capacities in humanities, economics, and analysis of politically driven policies. And that's where I come back to what I said about Niels Bohr and his way of looking at science and the humanities. The scientific role, of course, is the major consideration here of the scientists. And that is what was exemplified by when I talked about Niels Bohr. What can NIAS do about this? Of course, very, very nice way Mr. Ramamurthy articulated this, and also a roadmap which Ramamurthy suggested. Of course, that is one of the most important things that NIAS can undertake in its own framework of a multidisciplinary research program. And you can organize thematic seminars in each one of them where there is a specific areas like the GMO, in which I am sure that you organize some meetings. Or it could be related to the nuclear reactors or anything. And also, you can think of creating a special course, a short-term course where the science communicators could be getting the benefit of the best of the people who try to defend some of the programs or try to provide the alternate views on such program, whether we could bring into a kind of a course which can be crafted by NIAS for future. The other part of it would be the necessity of scientific departments to have a specific cadre of science. It is not sufficient that the Secretary of the Government of India and few scientists go to the public and talk about the science and technology part of what they did. There is something much more than that, as I said, in humanities, economics, and analysis of policy driven. So you need to create a cadre in each department, and actually NIAS can be a place where such cadres can be, you can facilitate creation of that cadre on behalf of the scientific departments if you have got a right type of strategy to do this. So the other part of it. And you can also conduct some research. You know, I talked about the nanosciences and the Dutch strategy of a public outreach. There have been several outreach. In fact, Ramamurthy mentioned about several other strategies in Australia and other countries. I think there's a need to have a very good research in this area as to what kind of impact they made, what kind of outcome it came out, and what is it that we can adopt against our own culture and social outlook in the context of science and technologies outreach to public. I think this is an area of research which certainly can be mounted in this institute by having the right type of minds taken not only from within but also from the various other institutions in this country. It is in this context also I see the questions of creating this youth science congress, talking about the scientific timbre. I think this is all a part of a kind of a culture of a society, which is an extremely important thing ultimately to appreciate the science and technology in its right perspectives, whether it is an enrichment, whether it is socially relevant, whether it is economically important, whether it has an industrial outcome. These things need to be properly appreciated and understood. This is called a scientific. It's not that you need to be an expert in physics or chemistry for it. There has to be a scientific timbre logically to look at the things. And this is something on which we need to, and that is why the organization of things like Youth Science Congress and many other kinds of meetings where the general public, in fact, the meaning of an Indian Science Congress, where the 4,000 to 5,000 has been often questioned. But I find that it's the only place where 4,000 to 5,000 of the people come, meet and exchange ideas. And these are the kind of forum probably that can create that kind of awareness about the science and its utility to the society. So in conclusion, I may say that's a very good beginning for NIAS to do. I want to call it beginning because this is not a conclusion of what we want to give. And this could, in the years to come, this will become one of the major activities of this institute, and therefore call it as a center of excellence in this area, which the nation can look forward to in terms of what strategies they need to adopt as we increase our investments in science and technology, and correspondingly, the public awareness also correspondingly we increase. So I wish the very best in this seminar for your deliberations, and also greet NIAS on its 626th anniversary today. Thank you very much.
We come to the close of the inaugural session of this seminar, but before we break for a group photograph and high tea outside, let me just inform all the speakers that all the talks would be recorded, there would be audio as well as video recording of all the talks. So thank you very much for being here for the inaugural session. We would now like to break for a group photograph outside and tea. And we reconvene at 11:15.